of Kakisalmi and the watercourse of the Vuoksi River at Taipale on the 23rd of August. The rapid Finnish advance threatened Soviet lines of communication in the Viiburī area. When the Soviet forces began to withdraw from the Western Isthmus, 4th Army Corps attacked to recapture Viiburī. Air Force activities became increasingly directed towards support of the ground offensive. 2 fighter squadrons were assigned as air cover for the attacking troops, and No. 14 Squadron was tasked with reconnaissance. Fighters actively sought air engagements in the Bay of Viiburī, where the Soviet Air Force tried hard to prevent Finnish troops crossing the waterways. The Battle of Viiburī ended on the 30th of August 1941, and the Karelian capital was again in Finnish hands. Three encircled Soviet divisions were destroyed to the south of the city. In the Viiburī area, the Finns had their greatest victory of the war. While the battle for Viiburī was still going on, plans for the capture of the entire Karelian Isthmus rapidly unfolded. The Supreme Commander halted the advance on the outer defensive perimeter line of Leningrad on the 2nd of September 1941. At the beginning of September, the Karelian army was ready to continue the advance northwest of Lake Ladoga towards the River Svea and Lake Arisjärvi. Most of the available fighter squadrons, 2 liaison squadrons and 1 bomber squadron were assigned to support the advance. Heavy preparatory bombardment by 16 artillery battalions, never before seen on the Finnish front, preceded the Finnish breakthrough. 6th Army Corps crossed the river Tuulasjoki and began advancing towards the town of Aunus and the River Svea. At the beginning of the attack, artillery fire was successfully controlled by the pilots of 12th Squadron. As the assaulting army advanced, Fokker fighters strafed withdrawing Soviet troops and motorized columns after becoming engaged in air-to-air combat with Soviet fighters as well. As long-range squadrons, No. 42 still operated east of Lake Ladoga and No. 44 in the area of the Karelian Isthmus. Due to a lack of reliable maps to support operations, large areas in East Karelia were photographed by Blenheim bombers. Reconnaissance flights were directed in particular to the Murmansk railway line and the roads to Petrozavodsk from the west. Such bombing raids often cut vital Soviet communications, and many trains were destroyed. A true blitzkrieg was being waged by 6th Army Corps. In 3 days, the spearhead of the attack had advanced 75 kilometers, the vanguard reaching the Svea on the 7th of September. The next day, the Murmansk railway line was cut. By October, the Karelian army had reached the shores of Lake Anisjärvi, and Finnish troops had spread out along the entire length of the River Svea. Then they turned north to the town of Petrozavodsk. Advancing ground forces were also supported in the wilds of East Karelia by air resupply. This was of great significance, even though the amount of material and personnel transported was not large by present-day standards. Only one Douglas TC-2, one old Fokker transport and a couple of small Junkers aircraft were available for the task. Nearly 20,000 kilograms of fuel, 2 radio stations and medical supplies were delivered to Colonel Lagos's troops advancing on poor roads. Wounded soldiers were evacuated on the return flights. During the ground forces advance, liaison squadrons concentrated on the roads to Petrozavodsk. The closer they came to the town, the more difficult it became to operate due to patrolling Soviet fighters. When the air situation on the Karelian Isthmus had stabilized, the main part of 24 Squadron was relocated in the Ladoga area. On the 1st of October 1941, Petrozavodsk was captured by Finnish troops advancing from the west and south. The Karelian army was ordered to advance north and capture the towns of Karhumäki and Povensa with reinforcements from 2nd Army Corps. The fighter squadrons of 2nd Air Regiment covered the advance into Karelia. 16 Squadron flew reconnaissance and photography missions and harassed the Soviet withdrawal. The onset of winter and worsening weather interrupted flying operations, which gradually reduced on all fronts. While the main effort moved ever northward, 24 and 28 squadrons were relocated to airfields around Petrozavodsk. Karhumäki was taken on the 5th of December 1941, and in the freezing cold, Povensa fell the day after, in what was to be the last offensive of the Karelian army. The advance by the 14th Division, operating further north in the wilds of the Lake Rukajärvi area, was initially supported by the Air Force with aircraft from several squadrons. At the beginning of October,